Hey everyone, welcome to the MudRoom. Okay, is it working? What's going on? Okay, just a second here. Oh, okay. Yes, it looks like it's working now. Sorry about that, y'all. I'm not entirely sure what happened. I just looked over and it had said that it had stopped broadcasting. Okay, Facebook and I are having issues. We're not being super in love this week. I think it's just kind of overloaded. Like everybody's on Facebook Live. Hey Charlene. Okay, so I don't know where it cut off, y'all. I don't know what I was saying when it cut off. I just looked over and it was not working. So anyways, I'm just gonna keep going, okay? So we're talking about planned ignoring today. Before we get into it though, let me introduce myself. My name is Allana Robinson and I'm a parenting coach. I usually have it much more together than this. I help parents of toddlers, preschoolers, and kindergartners understand why children are misbehaving and how to fix it without yelling, shaming, or timeouts. I am your host here on the MudRoom. I'm also the host of the Parenting Posse Facebook group I just mentioned, and I host Parentability, which is my membership community where I personally help you solve your child's behavioral struggles. If you're here, say hi, just like Charlene did. Let me know that you're watching and where you're watching from and how you are doing. If you're watching the replay, drop a replay in the comments. If you find this video helpful, do me a favor and give it a like. And don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss a MudRoom. Okay, so planned ignoring. Planned ignoring is a strategy that we're only going to use on repetitive attention-seeking behaviors, okay? I know y'all are probably dealing with a lot of that right now with so many people working from home, but this is not a strategy to be used for any other kind of behavior. So what do I mean by repetitive attention-seeking behavior? You know when you've addressed a behavior like, say, your child has been throwing toys a lot and you've redirected it into a safe throwing outlet. One of my clients really likes to use putting a basket at the bottom of a flight of stairs and giving them some soft balls or stuffies to throw into the basket. So you've redirected, the throwing outlet is available to them, it's there, it's stocked, it's prepped, but every once in a while they pick something up and they give you the look. Every parent knows the look. I know I'm not supposed to be doing this, but how are you going to react? Look, right? That is a repetitive attention-seeking behavior. They're doing something specifically to try and provoke a big response from you. Now, usually run-of-the-mill attention-seeking behavior is actually stress behavior. It's not misbehavior. Children will generally attention-seek when they're running low on energy and they don't have the gas in the tank to do what needs to be done. Kids do well if they can. They're trying to get your attention so that you'll help compensate for their lack of energy. And that's human nature. I don't have the ability to do this. I'm going to go find someone who does, and they're going to help me. So you're not going to whip this out every time your child attention seeks, because attention seeking is generally just really a red flag that they're low on energy, and you either have to give them a break or you need to help them. But when it's that repetitive attention seeking behavior, it's really more of an extinction burst. It's not so much of I can't do this, I'm going to go find help. It's under what circumstances can I provoke her to help me? It's that scientific method. They're testing a hypothesis. And as I said, you can usually identify that because they'll be giving you that will you, won't you look. Hey Kate from Toronto. Hey Laura. Charlene, you're from Athlone? Where is that? Laura's from St. Louis. Awesome! Thank you for being here with me. Okay, so what do we do in those situations where we've met the need, you've set the limit, and they're having a burst? We use planned ignoring. Now, there's a mantra to planned ignoring. Planned ignoring is not just mentally going, I'm going to ignore that. The mantra for planned ignoring is ignore the behavior, not the child, okay? The child still needs attention, but we're going to ignore the behavior. So in the instance where a child is kind of testing you by holding a toy, like they're going to throw it and looking at you, you'd probably walk over, take the toy out of their hand, replace it with an acceptable throwing toy that you've provided, and move them over so that they can throw it into the basket at the bottom of the stairs. You're not going to acknowledge that they're testing you. You're not going to remind them verbally. This is something that so many people do, and it just escalates things. You're just going to physically reinforce the boundary without drawing any extra attention to the behavior. We're ignoring the behavior. Oh, Charlene, you're in Ireland. Wow, what time is it there for you? Thank you for joining me. Hey, Kate. She's from St. Louis too. Kindle, hi. She says her son is always testing her and giving me the look. It's exhausting. He never listens. Well, it's not that he's not listening, right? It's that he's testing a theory. And that's what we do. That's what children do, is they're always constantly testing theories. The goal here is that we're going to disprove their theory, right? So you can also do this passively. Like another time when planned ignoring has to be used a lot is bedtime. When, you've set the limit, you've put them to bed, and they keep coming out of their room. The active way to use planned ignoring in that instance is to keep walking them back to their bed without any talking or eye contact. You're just going to return them silently back to bed. But you can also do that passively by putting up a baby gate, or my preferred method is locking the door, because it's both better for their sleep hygiene to not have a whole bunch of sound, and it's also safer because we should all be sleeping with closed bedroom doors to keep us as safe as possible in the event of a fire. Hashtag close before you doze. Does that mean if your child wakes up with a nightmare that you can't go in? No, we're ignoring the behavior, not the child. If they need comfort, go comfort them. If they're sick and they need medicine, to have their nose suctioned, or to be cleaned up, of course, you're going to go and do that. Those have nothing to do with the limit that you're reinforcing, which is that they stay in their room at bedtime. So I'm not telling you to give your child the silent treatment. The silent treatment is just like flat out ignoring, right? That's ignoring the child. If you're doing planned ignoring and your child comes and says, I love you, mommy, you're going to respond as you always would. That's not the behavior that we're ignoring. So here's an example. Raj comes into the kitchen and he hits his mother while she's chopping vegetables for dinner. And his mother picks up her cutting board and she walks over to the sink and she just continues to make dinner, right? She's ignoring the behavior. He hit her, she moved. Raj follows her and hits her again, and he's whining, but he's not really saying anything. So his mom takes her veggies over to the stove, and out of the corner of her eye, she can see little Raj there, standing on his tippy toes, reaching for a knife. So she goes over, she takes the knife, she removes it, gives a very simple directive in a very neutral voice. Knives are sharp and dangerous, we don't touch. And incensed, Raj screams and hits her again, but she saw it coming, so she intercepts his blow and she redirects it without looking him in the eye and continues doing what she was doing. Raj's mother is ignoring his hitting. She knows it's a repetitive attention-seeking behavior because he does it every night when she stops playing with him and she starts cooking dinner. But she isn't ignoring him. She is still watching him, ensuring that he doesn't hurt himself, and giving him the minimum attention necessary to keep both him and her safe. She's simply not giving his attention seeking any reinforcement. Now, if Raj were to say, "Mama, yogurt," that's not attention seeking. It's demanding, and we'd probably prefer that he ask nicely, but we aren't going to ignore that. We're either going to use a logical consequence process, or we're going to model correct request making. The goal of planned ignoring is to disprove their hypothesis. Remember how I said we're using this in the case of extinction bursts? When you remove attention from the repetitive attention-seeking behaviors and you give attention to positive behaviors, you disprove their hypothesis much faster, which means they're going to scrap it and move on to something else. Because attention is attention is attention. It doesn't matter if it's negative or positive. It's still giving them attention, and it's still reinforcing the behavior that we don't want to see. It doesn't matter if it's negative or positive. Attention is all processed the same way in the brain. So by removing the attention altogether from the negative behavior, we're removing the reinforcement. This is a very specific tool to be used for a very specific kind of behavior, but it's very effective for the purpose for which it was built. Woo, Charlene, you're up late. Kate says, our little buddy is having a hitting problem. He hits his brother. He hits me and his dad. We've tried giving him other options, stomping his feet, hitting a pillow, and he has some days and some awful ones with it. What's normal for 3.5, and how do we continue to help? So Kate, first of all, 3.5, they're really only have like 1.5 years of impulse control under their belt, right? So hitting specifically is an impulse control issue, right? You have the impulse to hit, and they do. So first of all, we want to be building up his impulse control skills. Second of all, this is a great time to use planned ignoring, but you're going to use it very specifically, right? Where you're going to ignore the hitting as much as possible, and you're going to pay attention to the victim, not the aggressor. And then you're going to come back when everything's calmed down, and you're going to use a logical consequence process. Does that make sense? It's hitting also, it's really difficult. Hitting is very sensory. It gives very specific input. And it's really almost impossible, especially for really little kids, to replace something like hitting, throwing, biting. It's really hard to replace that sensory input with different sensory input. They're usually doing that specific thing because it's giving them the kind of input that they need to regulate in that moment. So that's why I'm not saying like, tell your kid who is throwing things to stomp their feet. Well, that's not going to replace that, because stomping your feet is a very different sensory input than throwing, right? Throwing is a really difficult one to replace because it's got a lot of components to it. It's got the visual linear component of it, where they're actually seeing their arm go past their head. It's got the gross motor, deep pressure, depending on how heavy what they're throwing is, right? And hitting's the same kind of thing, where there's a visual component to it, there's a sensory component to it, there's a heavyweight component to it. So trying to replace hitting with something like stomping your feet is not going to do it for them. They're doing that specific thing. They're hitting because that's the kind of input they need. So redirecting their hitting to something that they can hit is probably a better strategy, where it's like, okay, you can't hit me, but you can hit this pillow, or you can go and hit your bed, or you can hit a punching bag. My boys love my punching bag. Or, you can hit the couch. There's lots of things that we can hit that aren't people. So that's probably going to hit the nail on the head a little bit better. Does that make sense? Kate says, how long does it take for planned ignoring to typically kick in? We've been trying to practice it and making a bit of headway, but we're still struggling. it depends on A, if you're using it correctly, and B, if the extinction, how long the extinction burst has been supported. Reinforced. That's the word I'm looking for. If they've been doing this behavior and getting something out of it for a long time, you're now trying to disprove a hypothesis that was previously proven, and that takes a lot longer. Sarah says, what is a logical consequence for hitting? That's not something, well, okay, so depends on the approach you're taking. First, you're going to ignore the aggressor, You're going to ignore the aggressor, pay attention to the victim. Sorry, I'm having too many thoughts all at once here. Ignore the aggressor, pay attention to the victim. And then when you come back, everybody's calmed down. Then you're going to go back, and there's lots of different ways that you can approach it depending on what the antecedent of the behavior was. So it might be that you're going to be like, hey, so you hit your brother because you wanted his truck, right? And that's going to take a very different turn to, hey, you hit your brother because you were angry, right? So when you use the logical consequence process, naturally, you're going to be able to adjust for those different antecedents because you're going to be using your declarative statements to call out what you saw. If you need more information on the logical consequence process, you can go to allanarobinson.com/NLC intro. I'll put the link to that right here. And that kind of goes through the whole process. Tammy, what about with babies, toddlers? My girl just turned 1. Example, she reaches for the cat food. I say her name in a warning tone. She immediately turns and looks at me with that look. Sometimes she'll move away from the cat food. Sometimes she'll reach out for it. What is the best for me to do in that situation? That's a beautiful time to use planned ignoring. Instead of saying her name with a warning tone, which is really kind of a threat, just walk over and remove the cat food. Okay? You see her there. You see what she's doing, just go and take it away. Ignore what she's doing. Keep her safe, which is not eating the cat food, and just move it. And then go and move on to something else and put the cat food back as you leave the room, right? So planned ignoring is really, really a great thing to use with babies and toddlers because they're very much testing their hypothesis in the early stages of it. So it's usually pretty easy to disprove a hypothesis for a 1-year-old because they don't have a whole lot of data backing them up. Okay. Great questions, guys. What do you think? Do you have some ideas of where you could be using planned ignoring right now? Tammy does. Kate does. If you need support in figuring out where and how planned ignoring should be used versus when to use other tools, we're ready and waiting to support you in parentability. Planned ignoring is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle, as you can probably tell by how I was answering those questions. On its own, it's not going to solve anything. It's an in-the-moment tool, but we still need to be building up those skills, reducing stressors, and building critical thinking skills so that planned ignoring becomes largely unnecessary, except in very select instances. And in parentability, we support you in creating a plan that you can implement in just 10 to 20 minutes a day so that you can eliminate those behaviors once and for all and not have to use these immediate strategies. And the link for that is in the description. Okay? That is it for it today. Thank you for coming to hang out with me. I loved all the questions. I hope you all have a productive, low-key week at home. Stay home. And I'll see you next week for another Uncommon Sense Parenting class. Bye.